you know, so none of this, there's nothing good about any of this. I wonder, and we can deal with this as we move through this period, but the idea that we're going to ask for certain things tonight, maybe the retirement issue, because you can explain maybe why we need that tonight. But generally speaking, this is an iterative process, as you have said, Your Honour, and that this board should anticipate that our requests and the comments and the outcry from our community and from our students, teachers and others will be heard by you and the aldermen, and that we will see a different budget than the one that you presented under the constraints of the tax cap, and as you, well, a couple of percent below the tax cap. So I just want to be careful that there are no decisions being made tonight. These are the result of considerations that have been made, and it's sort of a best guess as to where we are. But I just want to extract a couple of things, if I might, from what the superintendent said, that I think one of the challenges is in our city, and perhaps in lots of cities, is that people talk past each other and there's not a common set of facts. Especially we find the challenge with the Board of Mayor and Aldermen who are not involved every day with our schools, so it's not an easy topic to get your head around, with great respect to our aldermen. Also, the issue of multiple funding sources, state and federal funding, and how they affect our budget becomes confusing, because we see the school district budget has gone up by X number of $1 million, and our taxpayers misconstrue that is additional taxes in the city of Manchester. So one of the things I'd like to highlight for all of us and for those listening is the number that Dr. Camille gave when she talked about if this budget were to go forward, it would mean that the school district in Manchester has had what has cost the taxpayers, our property taxpayers in Manchester over the last 6 years since 2020 is 1.06, basically 1% a year against an inflation rate of 3.5%. So in real terms, this school district has been producing more every year with better results. We have increased pay to $15 an hour for people who are earning $9.50. We have brought our staff somewhere close to a reasonable number so they're not leaving in droves. We have reduced class sizes and all the other things that the superintendent named. I just think that's one number that the taxpayers just, when you're listening to others, let's keep one thing in mind. And if you think it's not right, go ask somebody. The proposal would have our school district increase budget at just a smidgen over 1% a year over 6 years. And that's despite the fact that all the costs. So that's one number. The other thing I'd like to draw people's attention to is under the budget that's proposed, the $1 million last year, as an example. The $1 million last year was almost matched by our increased utility costs of $970,000. So the day we got that $1 million, that was the end of that. That was the city's contribution to all the cost increases in the school. All the rest was left to this board and this administration to find a way of paying for everything else. Under the current budget with $2 million, to put that in perspective, and again, remember this number, 1% a year. When people say to me, and I hear my people I talk to across the city, and I'll hear from people who the ones who aren't arguing in favor of maintaining great schools and keeping great schools, the ones who talk about costs, they repeat things like, my taxes keep going up and you guys are spending. I want to shout it from the mountaintops tonight. This Board of School Committee and this administration is delivering what it's delivering at a cost of 1% a year, which is the choice of the alderman. We have gotten additional funding from the state, which we fought hard for and convinced people that our students are the most needy in the state. But the second number I want to emphasize is the second two numbers is this $1 million for last year. This year, that $2 million it will not account for the increased cost of insurance for our staff this year. So before we ever pay for any increased costs for anything in this district, what you're proposing, Your Honour, in your budget will not cover our increased insurance. So I just like to put those things in perspective. I want to respect my colleagues and their opportunity to speak, and we may have lots of things to say, but, you know, we need to do better. Nothing in this city has happened to cause this. We haven't had an economic downturn. The city is booming in many ways. We see it on Zillow and other places. Thanks in part to the work of the aldermen and others, right? So we haven't had an economic collapse. We haven't had an environmental collapse. No hurricane, thank God. No tornado. Nothing has happened. This city is moving forward. We're delivering results. We're finding savings. $2 million in savings. This board is delivering $2 million. I don't want to get into a back and forth with the aldermen, but I'd ask them, when was the last time they found $2 million in savings in their budget? Under this budget, there's not a single person, and I don't believe we can afford to lose them. Nobody at the city is going to lose positions. We're going to lose 38 to 40. And that doesn't include some of the poorest staff who may get layoffs when we renegotiate our cleaning contract. Because that's not going to be seen here on our budget, but we're going to go out to Aramark and ask them to reduce level of service, which means that they're going to reduce staff. And those people 4 years ago were earning $9.70 an hour in what was a disgrace to this city. So on the city side, as was pointed out by the superintendent, I'll be a little less, she is kinder in her words. I would point out that not a member of staff is going to be lost on the city side. In actual fact, the pay for the city, the $7.5 million that the city needs to pay its staff because it's so woefully behind in paying firemen, policemen, DPW workers and others, that $7.5 million is effectively coming out of the school budget. You're taking the $6.5 million that we got additional from the state last year, rolling it over on the city side and applying it to pay off an accumulated a shortfall there. So I think it's important that people understand that the budget as proposed requires us to do better. I appeal to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and to you, Your Honour, to now that especially when we'll have additional funding, hopefully, or additional revenues perhaps found beyond the limits of the tax cap, that we fully fund the Manchester School District so we can continue to do the work that we've been doing, show and demonstrate to our city and to people looking at us from the outside. This is a city that takes its future seriously, takes its students seriously, takes its obligation to the poorest and most needy citizens in the state of New Hampshire. We take that seriously, and we deliver a realistic budget, which in the end is just the cost of living increase. We're not looking for anything more than what the cost of living has increased. And with that, I'll hand back to my fellow members. Thank you.
Committee Member Spillers.
Thank you. I could express my same frustration as Vice Chairman O'Connell. I think I'll just skip it and just go to some of the more practical questions I have about how these reductions are going to impact the day-to-day. When it comes to transportation and that we're going to charge high schoolers, how much is that going to cost per day for a high school student?
Right now, we were looking at a $10 pass per week, would get us somewhere around $70,000 if we had participation at a higher level within the student body.
And how many weeks are there in a school year again?
180 days, and how many weeks is that? I don't know how many weeks exactly.
100.
180
That's 180
school days, yeah.
days. So, what'd you say?
It depends on our vacations and all that.
36 weeks.
So it's about $360 then for a family for one high school student to ride the bus, potentially.
That's why I pointed out, when I undercut my own recommendation, that it will have some inequities as we go
Yep.
through transportation changes.
Yeah. And, you know, I want people to understand that word, inequity, right? We're talking about kids who are not going to be able to afford that to ride the bus. And that's a shame. We also provide transportation, I know, to a lot of the other schools. I think you mentioned some of the parochial schools and the charter schools in the area. You don't have to go into specifics about how it's going to be, if it's going to affect them, but I'm curious, is it going to affect those schools in addition to our public schools?
Correct. We're legally obligated to provide like service for what we provide for the district schools to the charters and parochials. So any changes we make would have a cascading effect to those locations as well.
So this is an issue that will affect you no matter where you send your child to school, unless you're sending them to a sole private, or maybe you homeschool your children. If you send them to a parochial school that gets transportation from Manchester School District, if you send your child, is Founders Academy one?
Correct.
If you send them to Founders Academy, it will be affected. So even though your kids are not going to the public schools, they are being affected by the decisions being made by our mayor and by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen in reducing the budget. When you talked about the contract service line, you said that that was mostly nurses, paras, psychs.
Correct.
In those positions, are they not necessarily ones that would be under that same attrition? I guess just explain that for me a little bit.
So they wouldn't be within our attrition. Right now, we have essentially placeholders. If we hire a contract service provider, we hold a place within our general fund budget. We don't fund it if we're funding the contract service, but it's a one-for-one exchange. So, for example, if next week we had 2 speech-language pathologists who came in and we were able to hire them, we would reduce by 2 on the contract service line. We know that contract service providers are on average 2 to 3 times higher than a general funded staff member. So right now, we're seeking to push that recruitment surge, try to get more of those in-house, and then decrease the contract service number.
But the contract service line, you're reducing it, but you're still projected to need these positions.
Yep, we gave you a conservative reduction of 1.3 million. We're hopeful that we can actualize more, but given the workforce shortage that we've seen over the years, we just started to see the boom hit in the paraprofessional line. We're hopeful that we will see that start to take place in other designations as well. That will be something that we're going to work on through the balance of the year.
Yeah, I certainly hope so too, but I hope people understand that this is going to affect potentially our students in special education, because these are services and positions that primarily serve that population.
Can I just clarify? If we can't fill them, we will still continue to use contract service as our emergency backup plan, but right now the goal is to hire inside first.
Sure, absolutely. And then I'm looking at the one-time funds, and that concerns me that we're drawing down so heavily from one-time funds, just considering, the recommendation to have 10% within our trust funds, et cetera. Are there any areas that are maybe bigger chunks of our budget that could be drawn down from instead of that one-time funds?
Sure. So I think the board could consider areas that we did not either put into a full recommendation or we came in at a lower amount. Some examples would be the athletics line, the reduction in force, our school-based positions or district-based positions, and increase those reductions. We could look at further reductions in facilities. Other than that, we don't have a lot of other room to look at reductions, so it would be either looking into athletics deeper or increasing the reductions. I will caution the board, when we ran the numbers for a greater reduction in our teaching pool, our class sizes went crazy, so we saw increases over policy in both middle and high school, in addition to the elementary that I shared earlier.
So if we were to try to even that out a little bit, it sounds like maybe athletics would be something that we would need to take another look at. Are there already some ideas that you might have?
So I did not pursue anything in athletics. As I shared earlier, I think the position we took was looking out for the best interest of students and staff. We didn't feel athletics was our best place to go, nor did we think increasing class size well beyond our current policy language was either a good idea. So we pushed back in using additional one-time funds. And we agree, dipping into those funds is a practice we need to stop. This year, Karen and I put in $4.5 million into the budget, which was half a reduction from what we used last year at $9 million. So we were trying to wean the district from the use of one-time funds to find ourselves back in that position.
Okay. I definitely understand that thought process. I guess I would caution everyone in terms of the one-time funds that those don't come back necessarily. And so, you know, it might be worth taking a, I mean, I know this is her recommendation, it's a process, we're going to have lots of roundabout conversations. I think everybody should keep athletics in the back of their minds, though, since that's something that kids don't necessarily, you know, we don't need it, they need it, but it's not something we have to have. Just a thought. You know, these are the hard discussions we're going to have over the next couple of weeks. Thank you, that's it.
Committeemember Baines.
I've seen this movie before. And I just want to give a few thoughts, and I'm not going to get all worked up about it, but there's several things that we need to think about here. And correct me if I'm wrong. The mayor, your budget is a 0.85% increase over our budget last year, correct?
Correct.
So your budget is giving us less than 1%. Reno O'Connell just pointed out the $1 million would take it up with insurance. What is the staff increases collectively, teachers, everybody, what percentage are we looking at?
Are you talking about their contracts?
Yeah, what are the increase in personnel?
They average from 3% on up to 4%,
Okay,
differing per
so
bargaining unit.
There's another 3 to 4, and I'm staying just focused on the facts. We have 3 to 4% increase that we're mandated to do through our teacher negotiation process. Let's want everybody to think about that at home too, and I want the aldermen to think about it, and I realize these are tough things to deal with. Next thing I want to talk about is our trust funds, which we should be calling rainy day funds, because that's what they are. There is a huge danger to use those. I've witnessed it over, you know, I've been around a long time, so I've seen how this has happened. And I won't call out mayors or specific boards of mayor and aldermen when they've done this. One time it was done, and what happened was that the budget I'm talking about, they used every possible reserve that was available. By the way, at that time, the school district had none, no reserve, absolutely zero reserves. This board, over the past several years, has been highly responsible in building up those reserves because the special ed cost is like a volcano that hits us. The first meeting I had with Vice Chairman O'Connell when I was going on this board, he talked about the special ed cost, especially transportation out of district, was not sustainable. We're making progress there. It's not sustainable. So one of the years I'm talking about, when all the reserves were rated on the city side, the next mayor that came in, the next board of mayor and aldermen came in, had a hole that they had to fill. Remember they say, remember the past, because if you don't study history, you're condemned to repeat it. They had to raise taxes, my recollection, 16%. And by the way, that mayor only served one term. Because how do you do something like that? They were really trying to save the city at that time. And it happened another time. By the way, when I left office, we had 20-year agreements with all the sending towns. First time it ever happened. We used to have year-to-year agreements. By the way, those 20-year agreements would be maybe expired maybe 1 or 2 years ago. Maybe it would even be now. I don't recall the exact years. And we made a commitment to those sending towns. Number one, we would keep class sizes according to what the state recommendations were. That the sending towns would have input at our meeting. They wouldn't be members, but they would come to the meetings, we would ask for their input, et cetera, et cetera. 20-year agreements. Well, guess what happened? Another administration raided the reserve funds. And what happened? Massive teacher layoffs. Class sizes going into the 40s in some classes. Dissenting towns came forward and said, you're not adhering to our agreements. We want out of our contracts, and the millions and millions and millions of dollars we were receiving went out. Hooksett and Bedford was inevitable because the town was growing and a lot of things were happening. I lived with that for 20 years at West. We never should have lost Hooksett, Auburn, and Candia. Never. But they're gone, and they're not coming back. If they were thinking about it, they're going to look at what's happening here. I don't think they're looking at it anyway. I'm being realistic about it. So using one-time funds, it's going to come back to haunt not this mayor, not this school board member, maybe none of you here, but it's going to create a hole that's going to be devastating at some point in time. If not devastating, it's going to hurt a lot. Let me use a better word. And make some choices extremely difficult, like the choices that we're making here. So 4.5 million, 9 million in last year, out of our rainy day funds. And I would ask this question to the mayor, respectfully, because I do respect him a lot. Would the aldermen even consider using their rainy day funds to help this district or even reduce taxes further? What do you think the answer would be to that?
I mean, it would certainly be something that I would have to talk to them about.
Highly unlikely, though. Would you admit they would use their rainy day funds? Because they're all concerned about it. And we're concerned about it because of all the unknowns that we've been talked about. But our vice chairman is correct. The amount of money that we're being asked to spend to keep the tax rate where it is, and I understand the goal of wanting to do that. Maybe the mayor feels compelled to do it. Whatever the reasons are, that money that's coming out of us is balancing to keep that tax rate where it is right now to pay for the much-needed increases for police and fire and DPW. I'm not arguing against that at all. But it shouldn't be on the backs of the school district. Transportation. When the superintendent said it tonight, and she told me the other day, we're going to require students to walk from here to the distance of Elliott Hospital? I will never support that. To me, that's a safety issue. Walking in a city. To do that, if we have to live with this number, we have to cut someplace else. I understand why we're rating the rainy day fund, because the choices, if we didn't, would be devastating. So those are the words of caution. I've seen this movie before. And I'll close by saying this. Manchester, in my view, has never, ever been in the position it is right now as the economic engine of the state of New Hampshire. It's never, ever been in this situation. What's happening with Army, I'm hoping that every alderman, no disrespect, has gone down and meet with Dean Kamen and all the people that are down there. I don't think a lot of citizens of our city really understand the magnitude of what is going on there. The entire world is looking at Manchester, where the place is going to change the lives of people for generation to generations. I've been there several times, most recently a year ago, to see they're working on stem cell research about growing the cells from your body to replace your shoulders, to build kidneys to save lives of people. They are attracting young people from all over the country to work in those mills. Every time I drive up the highway, I look over there and see that all those parking lots are full of people working in Manchester. And you can go around the city. I just visited what the York family is doing with their companies and their vision for the Center City activity, West High grads, by the way. So all this positive stuff is going on. And my final comment for this phase of my discussion will be saying this, and repeating something I've said before. When I had the privilege of working at Dine with about 500 of some of the smartest, youngest people I've ever worked with, I had smart and brilliant people that I was a principal of, the people I worked with. So I worked in an environment with 500 people. And I'm not exaggerating this. I was always an ambassador for Manchester, and I was their oldest employee, by the way, too, because everybody was in their 20s. And I would say, do you live in Manchester? And a number would say, yeah, we're living in Manchester. That's why you see the demand for over 2,000 apartment units. People want to live here. Then I would ask the question, would you consider staying in Manchester when you have children? Up until recently, no one ever said yes to that question. No one ever said yes. And I would make the case for Manchester, because they were working with Jeremy Hitchcock and Kyle York and all kinds of other, Adam Coughlin, and they were all West High grads, young people bringing up their families. So I'm hoping, number one, the comments that were made about charging for athletics that was in the paper, that did not help us. We would never charge kids to pay for athletics. And we should never make kids walk 2 miles to school. And we should never be rating our stop calling them anything but rainy day funds. Because they wouldn't touch those funds on the city side, nor should they, by the way. I'm not advocating they do it. But the only way we survive is by spending our rainy day funds. Thank you, Your Honor.
Committee Member Neal.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. I have a really unique position on this board, and I don't speak about it that often, but I am a public educator. I'm a classroom teacher. And so it feels really important right now to draw a thread or make a connection between staff morale and student engagement. Earlier this evening, we heard about a staff member who resigned their position because, in short, they felt unheard and unsupported. We heard again about student engagement. And these conversations, the reduction of the budget, that negatively impacts staff morale. An increase in class size, that reduces staff morale. When staff feel unsupported, they leave. Again, I can speak from experience. I left the first district I taught at because I didn't feel supported. This directly impacts our students, and that's the reason why we're all here. We're all here having these conversations because we care about the children and families in our community. And I just want to focus a little bit about the increase in class sizes. I can't speak about elementary school because I'm not an elementary school teacher, but as a high school teacher, when my class sizes are big or when they're at their capacity, students get overlooked. I don't get the opportunity to dig in curriculum. Students, we don't get to see, I don't know, it's really hard. Students don't get to experience all the things that I and my colleagues are really good at doing. And so I think that at an elementary school level has to be more drastic. I also wanted to ask, and this is, I apologize for being ignorant on this, but what happens when we're in violation of our own policy? And maybe somebody who's also on the policy committee can help me answer this, but we have a policy in this district that caps class sizes, and that's something we're really proud of. So what happens when we are intentionally going into a school year violating that policy? Like what?
I would have to notify you that we're in direct violation of the policy language we have as a school district, and then I would ask the board's direction of where to go next.
Okay.
We would provide updates. We'd give you all the strategies that we've tried to deploy to bring it down, but essentially we would have to own that we were violating our own policy.
Okay. Thank you. And I just have a couple other questions. Again, this year we've spent a significant amount of time as a board discussing methods to increase attendance in our schools. This is a conversation we have at our full board meetings. We have this conversation at policy, at student conduct. It comes up at teaching and learning. And we've heard from community members throughout the year about their frustration here with our attendance. And I'd like to reiterate Committee Member Spiller's point about inequalities and inequities and draw the connection as clearly as I can. When students cannot afford to travel to school, they aren't going to come to school. When they can't get here, they won't get here. We can write as many attendance policies as we want. We can be as punitive as we want. But if they can't afford to come to school, they will not come to school. And so with that, do we know how many students would be impacted by the change in the walkout radius?
We have, we've got information at the elementary and middle. Right now, we're not legally obligated at the high school to provide transportation at all, so that would impact all 4,000. If you give me 2 minutes, I'll just do quick math back here, and I can get you the elementary and middle.
Just while you're doing that quick math, I wanted to make one more note about supplies. That seems like a really small line item. But again, as a classroom teacher, I'd like to remind folks about the fact that many of our teachers who we've determined to be underpaid as compared to nearby districts are already purchasing their own supplies. Any classroom that you go into that's decorated, those decorations are paid for by teachers. When your children feel warm and welcome in their learning environments, that's money spent by teachers coming out of their own pockets. And so again, by reducing this line item, that continues to shift the burden of cost of engagement and support onto teachers. And I know that feels really small, but as a classroom teacher myself, I save all my receipts for my little tax break. I can keep going.
So our total for Manchester School District riders would be approximately $3,328 cost per day for both the in-district and then the private, the parochial and the charters is $851 per day. And then I think I heard your question as I was looking for that piece of information. It's a small number. I just want to caution, every number counts to keep reducing teachers' reductions in the classroom.
Yep.
So while, yes, I agree, the athletics expansion reduction is small, supplies is small, and transportation is small. If you keep thinking around $100,000, each one of those is a teaching position.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Committee Member Turner.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sorry, let me get to the right page. So I think I'm just going to go line by line here on the superintendent's recommendations. So in athletics, we're looking at $90,000 to stop the expansion, which includes the expansion in middle school on, I believe it was softball, baseball, wrestling, and unified PE. I'll tell you firsthand, I popped popcorn at Hillside last month with a mom who has a child with special needs. And during our popcorn popping, she was telling me how her 8th grader, who will be being promoted from Hillside, really longed for belonging with his peers to play some sort of athletics at the middle school level. And I was very excited to tell her that we were developing programming for unified sports and PE at the middle school level. I'm just sharing that example because it's not just me saying, oh, we need more money, we can't cut stuff. Like, this is really impacting families who are looking forward to this stuff. And coupled with that, I know we haven't gone into the special education presentation in our packet yet. We've moved beyond that. We'll go back to it. But it does say in there, we this year have a 23% of our student body has special education needs. So we're talking about cutting or pausing growth in what would be special education athletics and allowing these students to have an opportunity to participate and be like their peers. And we're pushing pause on this, in my opinion, for no good reason. We need to do better for all of our students, but we are seeing increasing special education students. So when we have a reduction in force, so moving on to the next category, reduction in force, we're talking about 38 school-based positions. I I will vote time and time again never to increase the class size. I've seen it. My kids have been in this district since 2012. I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. I've been here a long time. My kids have gone through all the elementary schools, middle schools. They're at Central right now. We are in the best place we have ever been in. And I refuse to take a step backwards. I refuse to. So if we're going to change that policy from 20 to 25 or 23, I will be voting no. There is no way we are going backwards. My son in 5th grade at Webster had 31 students in his class. With our increase in special education, you're talking about going from 4 special ed students to 5 or 6 or 7 in a class. And we still have one elementary teacher who is now trying to work that caseload in an elementary class. I reject that wholeheartedly. My question on that category for Dr. Camille, so when we're talking about 38 school-based positions that are through attrition, help me understand an example of what that looks like. So let's say we have a science teacher at Central who retires. What do we do with that position?
So what we do as a team is we go through and we look at our vacancies, our retirements, and our resignations. We have an understanding of what positions are available to be essentially used as a reduction. We then start moving staff as we need to get the right bodies into the right seats in the right school. So, example, we need a science teacher at a middle school. We may need to take a reduction that would be showing at a high school, move that position down to a middle school. When I met with the building level principals, one of the asks I gave each one of them was, as we go through this process, it's going to be a jigsaw puzzle. I'm going to be needing to move staff all across the district. We've talked to the union about the same level of grace and support to give those staff members who would be facing a transfer. So it literally will be looking at retirements, resignations, vacancies, needs in the schools that have openings, seeing if we can move bodies into those openings, and then working with HR to go through the transfer process. It will be a lot of movement across the city. We understand that creates a lot of disruption. So the HR team would be working directly with each school team to try to get those teachers welcomed into their new location.
I mean, I understand the point of efficiencies, but again, going back to Committee Member O'Neill's point, is that also erodes our morale, right? So if you have a teacher who, because of attrition, we're now moving them from high school to middle school to high school, they become part of the fabric of that school. Now, I understand how the teacher contract works, and I understand that it's the right of the district to do that. But what I don't want to see happen with reduction in positions is that we are collapsing some of our opportunities for our students. So if a class, the teacher retires, I would be against having that course dissolve altogether. Like, I know we have a very rigorous course catalog that we've worked very, very hard to create, and I reject any reduction in our classes. I mean, if we're, and I'm not suggesting you're doing this, but I'm imagining if we have an AP teacher who resigns, that class would collapse, and those students would then be in an honors or a general course. Or
So can I just jump in?
Sure.
I just want to restate, none of these recommendations I like.
No, I know.
I'm basically in a position where I'm eroding the work that we have actively pushed for the last 3 years since I've been sitting in this role. None of this I want to see happen. However, I can't staff if I don't have funding to staff at the level we're looking to staff. I have not once said I'm going to bring that policy on class size back for revision. I have no intention of doing that unless the board tells me I need to change the class size policy. None of this I want to do. What we would do is work directly with the union, work with HR, work with our teaching and learning team to look at who do we have where do we have registrations already in the queue, what do schedules look like, and then we start to backwards that jigsaw puzzle to try to make it all work. None of this I want to do. None of this I want to see for our district. None of this I want to see for our staff. And most importantly, I don't want to see any of this for our kids. None of this is my wish.
I hope you didn't assume that I was
you made a couple
suggesting
comments. I just
that.
want to make sure the
Yeah,
community
no, I
knows
find
none
this
of
whole
it's
thing
mine.
very upsetting, and I want anyone who's listening to know that this isn't just a number that, is it doesn't, it's not just a number that like, oh, it doesn't have an impact. It absolutely has an impact, right? I mean, if I went through this with a fine-tooth comb, I'm like, well, maybe we can pause wrestling for now, but really I don't want to pause the unified middle school program. People are looking for that. Like, we have students that need that program to have a sense of belonging in their middle school, to look at their peers and say, I want to play basketball too. And for me to have to go back to this mom, I'm popping popcorn on Thursday and be like, you know what, I think that program's not happening now. It's just every single number impacts a student population, a sliver. It could be a sliver of the population, but these all have real consequences, and it erodes the progress that we have made. It's just constantly eroding it, and I don't want to go back to the status quo. I really don't. I'm very, very proud to be a parent of 3 Manchester students, and I will sing the praises of our district till the end of time. But I'm here tonight to say that a lot of these cuts, and I know these aren't. This is not directed at you, but I 100% reject them. I also think, moving on, and I'll let my peers chime in as well. I think transportation, 100% agree with Committee Member Baines. I do not agree with having a 2-mile walkout. I drive my kids to Central in the morning. I see the kids walking to Central. I'd have to map out how far 2 miles is, but they don't even want to, walk their mile 0.4. I know also that I think it was Committee Member Want, maybe 2 years ago, you were a very, very loud voice in saying we do not need to be charging our high school students to ride the bus. And I 100% agree. So I would hate to, we did, right? Not too long ago, we're charging our high schoolers to ride the bus. And, I agree with Committee Member O'Neill. Like, we're talking about attendance. If we're going to be starting to charge our high school students again to get on the bus, they're not going to get on the bus. They're just not going to, they're not going, our attendance rates are going to drop, which is sad because they are growing once again. Reduction in scope of services, again, we are eroding once again. We just made a step forward, paying our Aramark service, our staff more. So now we're going to cut back on our cleanliness levels, our APA levels, which we will have a reduction in Aramark force, and we're going to have dirtier schools, period. I mean, we've made progress so that we are finally in a place where we walk in and we're proud and they look clean and shiny, and now we're going to erode that. We're going to take a step back. And then I did want to talk about the special ed increases. I know we're going to get to that presentation, but I think it's important to state the fact that our special education students, they have limited choices in terms of even if let's talk about at the state level for a second. We're talking about universal vouchers, and so now we have a student, for example, who has special needs, and they would like to take their voucher and go to they're going to use their school choice and go to a private school. The choice, that school choice is actually the school's choice. So they will look at that student and say, we don't educate special ed students. They are not legally obligated to educate special ed students. So that special ed student, voucher in hand, gets rejected from the private school. We are obligated legally to educate them. Whether they need a one-on-one nurse, a one-on-one para, special transportation, specialized equipment, that all comes out of our budget. That is the price tag that we are legally obligated to pay. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping the big picture in mind, not just here locally in Manchester, but things are happening at the state level that are trickling down and impacting what it costs the taxpayers here. So I would like to see more action from not only this board, but the aldermanic board on the state level to fight really for the taxpayers in Manchester at the state level and advocate for our hometown here. I will let my other peers talk.
Committee Member Bonilla.
Gracias, alcalde. Para mí, cuando te escuché hablando sobre el budget, 9.5 millón, I mean, that's a big number, And again, I know you don't take anything personal. And then this is the work that we're all in. But what I can do, right, I know you're going to hear from the rest of the committee on, the numbers and the impact of those numbers. But what I can best do is to elevate the amazing work that we've been able to achieve. And I hope that you can take those stories as you go into these meetings, whether public facing or having side conversations with the BMA. And I recognize it takes a collaborative effort between our boards and theirs. One, for a fact, I know that service is critical to us, to you and me, and to several other members in this board. I did 2 years of AmeriCorps, which then I became passionate about. It, I signed up for years of service because I saw the challenges that our students are facing currently that I went through personally, which brought me to this beautiful state to bring 17 to 25-year-olds across New England to serve in our Manchester School District, to which now many of those City or AmeriCorps members are now serving currently as full-time teachers. And when they hear conversations and they see these numbers, it does cause a sense of fear, which we know these are just numbers being presented and nothing's final. And al mismo tiempo, we know that this is the first step in the process, right? Other things that I can share with you is that we have continued to expand access for our multilingual learners. One thing that I can speak passionately about and also from a personal lived experience. Just for example, today, I know we mentioned the Lift Every Voice Summit. It's the third time we've had that event, and it's been spearheaded by full-time educators in our district who participate at Central High School, as well as with the support of our administration and executive teams, all of which many of them are present today. And today, to give you some context on what the Lift Every Voice Summit is, to remind folks, the summit aims to empower students, teach empathy, and amplify student voices with the goal of increasing student engagement. Students will practice their problem solving, critical thinking, and relationship building skills to shape a supportive and safer environment with their school community. I try to elevate that because, again, these are one of the amazing things that we have contributed in providing these services for our children, because now more than ever, we're at times where we have to prove in receipts to the impact that we're making. And I recognize this is taxpayer dollars. This whole summit, by the way, was entirely in Spanish, which when we see a line item about limited instructional materials, to me, right, no one said this, to me, I hear the amount of investment it takes to provide our students who are emergent bilinguals with the technology to understand, and even for our families to understand what's going on across the city when we talk about building projects or we talk about attendance and behavior and coursework, or anything, right? It takes money to invest in those materials. So those students who don't speak Spanish had the opportunity to use that technology and fully immerse themselves in the Spanish experience and to be in the same shoes as those who are emergent bilinguals. The technology works, right? But it was a great chance for all of our students to see that we are tied together. So overall, I wanted to share that portion with you, and I know I'll continue to have the conversations with you because my goal is to not have this $9.5 million reduction. And the message that I can give to our communities in Manchester is that tomorrow the Board of Mayor and Aldermen are having a special meeting on the budget for the FY26 budget. So come, show up at 5:45 and elevate your concerns as well to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, because we do hold positions of office, but it also takes all of us to do this work because we know that this is a whole collective effort. And to me, this is a bipartisan issue. It impacts us all, whether it's a public schools, whether they're non-public schools. And it's just, again, for me personally, again, continuing being a multilingual learner, emergent bilingual, I want what's best, again, for all of our youth as well, and especially our special ed students, right? Because it takes continuous investment in expanding, whether it's recognizing that we have limited class spaces for our students, but we have to provide these services. And it just takes money, but I want you to recognize that I want you to trust us and elevate these conversations with them, because I just don't want to see that 9.5. Gracias.
Committee Member One.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is my 9th time going through this. And this is the worst budget I've ever seen. And that's saying a lot. I just want to say, for clarity, that the tax cap amount this year is 4.27% that was available in the tax cap. That is what this board requested in order to essentially level fund our school district, keeping up with inflation. Instead, the mayor has proposed a total of 1.94% tax cap increase for his budget. That leaves 2.3, over half the tax cap on the table as disinvesting in our city, not putting money into our city, not putting, for years, when the tax cap was 0.8%, 1.1%, et cetera, really low. And we weren't given that. We were told, well, just wait until the tax cap is higher. You'll get more. Now here, the tax cap is a potential of 4.27%, and we are not even coming close to that. On the school side, we're getting barely a little over we're getting 1.2%. This is not sustainable. I want to draw everybody's attention to the bottom of our agendas. About 6 years ago, I requested we put our mission statement on the bottom of every agenda so that we are reminded every time we come to a meeting why we're here. That mission statement says our objective is to provide transformational learning experience and to ensure that every Manchester School District learner has high-quality post-secondary options to attain a technical certificate, gainful employment, or a 2 or 4 year degree. This budget will not support that. And I want to say, given that mission statement, that that's our vision for our kids and this district. And I have heard you on multiple occasions, Mayor, both at the Families in Transition Thanksgiving breakfast, at the event held for our breakthrough students. So Are You Smarter Than a Breakthrough Student? Say that a vision without funding is a hallucination, and what you've proposed is a hallucination. You are causing us to have to live a nightmare. That's the hallucination you're providing for us, because we are not meeting what's on the very bottom of our agenda here. That is our mission in this district to provide for our children. And I'm, along with my colleagues, as you can tell, incredibly upset by what's being proposed here. And I can only hope that your budget, which is proposed in March, which has to only account for the money that's come into that point in the year, that there will be more funds that will come in by June, and that our colleagues on the Board of Mayor Alderman will see the importance of educating students, and they will use any additional monies that come in that aren't accounted for now to put that towards not having to make students that are 6 years old walk 2 miles to get to school, which is not even fathomable for an adult. I don't think many of us sitting here would want to do that, or maybe even could do that, and certainly not when it's snowy and cold. And I have to say, we're going to wind up calling more snow days, because I can tell you when Dr. Camille has to think about, can I require kids to walk to school? If she's thinking they're walking 2 miles to school, she's going to think twice about a day when there's snow is 4 inches deep and the sidewalks aren't plowed, which the city is also responsible for. So I just want to say, I think this disinvestment is a tragedy for Manchester. We've made tremendous gains in the 9 years I've been on this board. The school district has come a long way, a really long way. And I see this is going to be a tremendous slide backwards if this is allowed to stand. And I don't know what I want to approve here tonight. I got to say, if I look and I'm comparing, and I know this, I practically came to tears when I met with the YO group the other day. I was sitting around a table with 15 high school students of color, and I was telling them that one of the things that might be cut is athletics. And I practically cried in front of them at the thought of taking that away from them. That might be the main reason that they show up to school. A lot of kids show up for school for athletics. We saw them, and we started our meeting tonight celebrating kids. They're getting scholarships for that. And yet, when I look at, do I feel that we should spend, I'm looking back at our numbers here, the $2.8 million, where is it? If we spend for athletics, we can either spend $2.8 million for athletics, or we can spend that money to put into our classrooms, $2.4 million for classrooms. I'm afraid, like when I think, are our kids here for athletics, or are they here to go to school and get an education? When I have to weigh those two things, I'm afraid I'm along with my colleague in Ward 1, Julie Turner, that I have to not go backwards on class size and what we're offering our students in school that contributes to their educational outcomes. Thank you.
Dr. Park.
Well, so much has been said. I think I wanted to ask a few clarifying questions and then make a couple comments there. So these might be boring clarifying questions there, but I think they're important there. So just on the process of the budget approval, so we know that we've been presented with some recommended cuts to our budget that align with the mayor's proposed budget. But we're not voting on that today, correct? When would we vote on something like this?
Correct. The recommendations we're bringing forward tonight are to align from the board-approved budget, then over to the mayor's budget. So we have that gap. It's giving recommendations this evening. It'll socialize through the BMA and then back to us. Once we have a budget that comes from the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, we would come back in and make any adjustments for a final phase for your approval.
So when would that approximately be?
It could go into June.
Okay, we don't know.
But as I said tonight, it's fortuitous that we have a Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting tomorrow night. So this is a conversation. Dr. Camille is making a presentation on the budget tomorrow night. We'll have the opportunity to discuss it as well based off of the conversation that's had this evening.
Okay, thank you. And then I wanted to ask a couple questions about the rainy day funds. Maybe we should call them emergency funds because it should be an emergency situation when we use them. I think Committee Member Baines was riveting in his explanation of the problems of withdrawing money from the emergency funds.
I haven't been called riveting in a long time, so just so you know.
And I wanted to ask Karen DeFrancis if you could help us understand maybe are there some some other additional concerns we should be thinking about when withdrawing that, like let's say we cover the entire cut by one-time funds by withdrawing that much from the emergency funds, 9.5 million there. Would we risk some poor ratings from our auditors by making a move like that?
Well, our auditors have recommended that for a district our size, we should have at least 10%. There was a time, the expendable trust didn't actually start until 2004. And there have been times when we have had, $100,000 in the trusts. What we run into is a situation, if we were to get hit with like a health insurance claim or a special education case, and we did not have the money for it, we can go into a deficit, which we cannot deficit spend. So by utilizing, the year that we're in right now, we utilized $9 million in one-time funds, as well as additional money, probably about $1.5 million in technology and curriculum. So the budget proposal we brought forward cut that in half. We recommended using $4.5 million. So we were on the road to start getting off of those one-time funds. I don't think it's wise to continue to spend one-time funds. We're going to, not only will our expendable trust balances be low, and we won't have them for emergencies, but next year, as much as we use this year, we have to make that up next year. So we're running into a situation starting the fiscal year 27 budget, looking at using $9 million of one-time funds again. How do we make that up next year?
Thank you, that helps us. And it reaffirms to me that these are emergency funds. They really are. Thank you. And then another question to clarity there. I'm not on the Finance and Facilities Committee, but my understanding is that there are several points at which the school district pays the city for certain things, like these city chargebacks, but also for permits in our construction and facilities there. If we're going to total up how much we're paying back to the city for things like that, would it reach into the multiple millions, would you say?
Well, our city service line item is about $10 million. Our debt service line item, which again is for bonded projects, that is about, I believe, a $12 million line item, plus the new funding that we have for the Phase 2 project. But if you were just looking at city services, it's about $10 million. Now, a big portion of that, probably about $4 million, is for Aramark custodial services.
Thank you. So if we were to think about the city wiping out some of those kind of silly chargebacks and permits there, we would save some money in our budget, right? Is that a fair statement?
We would save money on the city service line item. The permits are coming out of the Phase 1 bonding project, so it's not out of the
Separate
operating
line.
budget.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
It might be something worth thinking about, those chargebacks, I think. But I mean, on the city side, thinking about that, yes. All right, and so I guess, you know, I would have to echo what many people have said here. I think that the $9.5 million in cuts, it undoes the progress that we've been making, right? And I think it's important that we acknowledge that this is both political and for our kids and for our students, right? Like, we are all sitting here in political positions because we are in agreement that we think that investing in the students in Manchester is super important, right? We all agree on that. And that's what's made this board productive and really effective in getting things done. When I was first thinking about running for office, it was because teachers did not have a supply line for their budgets there. They couldn't get supplies for their classrooms. It was because the class sizes were too big, right? It was because the teachers were working without contracts. That's why I got into this there. And look at what we've been doing the last few years. Now they have a contract. It's much more solid there. We have a class size policy. I helped author that policy there. That took a lot of work and a lot of time, and now it works and it's happening. We have better class sizes here. And we have supplies sometimes too. I mean, these are basic things, right? And we've worked really hard as a board to make these things happen. And so I agree that this is a huge issue, that if these cuts go through, it's going to undo so much of what we've been working on the last few years there. And I think it's important to kind of underscore one numbers thing, if you'll indulge me there. So if we look at the mayor's proposed budget, it proposes that instead of receiving flat line with what we're receiving this year in our budget this year, we're receiving $4.4 million less in local taxes. That means we're actually getting less money than we're getting this year based on the tax rate there. And that's because that tax money is not coming to the schools, but to the city, right? This is a kind of sleight of hand. So our total budget may be going up a little bit, but that's because of state money, not because of local money. The local tax, what we're getting from the local taxes, is actually going down significantly. And I think that's important to underscore, because that means that if this budget goes through, the aldermen will be voting to cut money from what we're usually using in our current budget this year. It's not an increase of a slight 0.85%. It's a decrease, $4.5 million there. And I think that's really important to think about, because that's a conscious decision that politicians are making of their own volition that have huge consequences for the students in this city. And I think that's important because it is both politics and it is real. It's not a movie, it's happening. And we all need to get involved to protest that. Thank you.